Okay, today, we'll start with a little bit of movement today. Not a lot. It's still yin, don't worry. But I'll just turn to face the side of my mat. So you'll sit back reclined, soles of the feet on the mat. Hands are back behind you so you can lean back. And then you'll just start with windshield wipers. So just bring the knees side to side. Go slow. So if you go fast, it starts to wake up the body. If you go slow and have slow movement, it starts to slow things down a little bit, makes it more relaxing. You might even feel more of a hip opening as you go side to side. And do a couple more times each side. We'll start with the lower body today, start sprinkling in some upper body, and it'll be full body like usual. The whole entire class together. All right, so come back to center once you're done with that. And feet still wide, soles of the feet on the mat. And then if you feel like you're just collapsing down, then maybe sit up on a block or a bolster. Otherwise, you can bring the hands in front of you, start to let the head and the neck go. And you're keeping the knees and the toes in the same direction. This is a hip opening. Eyes can be closed. If you keep them open, try to just focus on one spot. And you want to keep the eyelids heavy either way, if they're open or closed. But your eyes aren't all the way open, even if they aren't all the way closed. Start to take a deep breath in through the nose. Exhale back out through the mouth softly. Inhale in through the nose. Exhale back out through the mouth. Inhale in through the nose. Exhale back out through the mouth. This time in through the nose. Back out through the nose. Keep going with this breath, Ujjayi. And there can be a nice rounding of the spine. The head can just hang. Just a friendly reminder with yin, we start by setting ourselves up into poses, not to go as deep as we can go, just get the pose started and then let your body sink into it over time. And you'll start to bring yourself back up and you'll come back to the way that we started. So bring the hands back behind you, lean back, move the knees side to side. Feel the difference now that you've been in a hip opening. Then you'll come to a cross-legged seat. So I'll turn to face forward. Come to a cross-legged seat. Doesn't matter which shin's in front. If you feel like you come into a cross-legged seat and the knees come up way high, propping the hips up onto something like a bolster would be a good idea. Could even be a block. If you have blocks, take two if you have two and just stack them in front of you, one on top of the other. I'm doing it so it's the lowest height, one on top of the other, but you might find that you might need to bring it up a little bit higher. You'll just build these where you need them, and you might not need them at all. Okay, so your easy cross-legged seat, reach the arms out in front of you, palms facing up, bring the right arm on top of the left arm, and you're coming into eagle arms. So eagle arms could be hands on the shoulders, especially if your shoulders are tight, then you just stay here. Some of you are comfortable bringing the forearms together. Some of you are comfortable bringing the left fingertips inside of the heel of the right hand. And then from here, you'll fold forward, and the elbows can rest on the block. So that's how you know the height of the blocks. And if they're too far out, you might need to bring them in closer. Right arm on top of left. And then you can see how that lands. And maybe it's too much altogether to have the blocks. So don't feel like you have to use them, but just keep it in a gentle place. You're doing a hip opening and a shoulder opening. You do want to be gentle with yourself while still getting a stretch. So it's almost like, think about getting into a warm bath. That's a little bit on the hot side. You have to take your time easing your way into it. You wouldn't just completely jump in right away. So it's the same thing with these poses. They're not, most of these shapes are not part of our regular movement throughout the day. And that's why they're so good for us, because we're getting our body going in a different direction, exploring all the things it's capable of doing. And over time, you might feel like the blocks need to be higher or lower for using them. And slowly start to lift the head and the chest. You can unwind the arms. If you're using blocks, they might need to move a little farther out away from you, so you can bring the hands back behind you. Look and just note which shin's in front, so you know how to switch sides. Feet wide, knees side to side. Do a couple of windshield wipers. Go in each direction once or twice. And then you'll switch the crossing of the legs. So other shin comes in front. Shifting side to side helps you get even on the sit bones. Ideally, you're crossing mid shin, but it might be wider than that, and that's okay. Then if you move the blocks out, maybe move them back in so they're closer to you. Reach the arms forward, palms up. This time, left arm on top of right. Some version of eagle arms that works in your body. Then start to fold forward over the legs, going slow. You might be in the same place. You might be in a different place. Let the head and the neck go. Start to sink in slowly. And it's time to come back up to seated. Set any props you have in front of you off to the side. Bring the hands back behind you, lean back, separate the feet wide onto the mat, knees side to side, back to your windshield wipers. Then this time you'll come back to seated, but this time the soles of the feet will be together, knees apart. So butterfly, Baddha Konasana. Again, you can prop the hips up on something if you want. The closer in the feet are, the more intense. The farther out is a little less intense. You want to get it so it's gentle. Then you'll fold forward again. Elbows can flare out. You can hang onto the ankles, shins, inner edges of the feet if that's easy. Just get yourself set up in that direction of the pose of leaning forward. Rounding of the spine's okay. Head can be heavy, so it just hangs. The neck doesn't need to do any work here. In fact, you'll get a nice stretch in the neck if you can release it and just use the weight of the head going toward the feet and the mat to give it a little bit of a stretch. Try not to let the shoulders, though, come down too. Just let them naturally round with the rest of the spine. So you're not reaching either way with them. Staying right where you are, noticing how far you've come into the shape. If you're a forward folder, it'll just naturally happen on its own. If you're not, then it might be more of a struggle. So you'll start to come back up to seated. Use the hands to bring the knees back together, hands back behind you, feet wide. Come back to those windshield wipers. We'll do one more hip opening that we've been kind of prepping for. That'll feel really nice because we did a little bit of shoulder opening too. So you'll come back to your cross-legged seat. Doesn't matter which shin's in front. You'll just switch when it's time to switch. Can shift side to side. Instead of leaning forward, we'll go back. So this will be a reclined, a Supta Sukhasana. So you'll come down onto the forearms. See how that feels. The trick here is you want the glutes to be going forward toward the top of the mat, not toward the back of the mat. So you might need to lift up, get those to go forward, and then you can come down onto your back. You can always widen the knees a little bit if you want to, if it's feeling like it's too tight of a fold in the legs and the hips. Then reach the arms overhead, clasp opposite elbows, and that's another light shoulder opening. The one we did before was a lot deeper than this, so hopefully this feels a little bit more relaxing. And if it's too much to clasp opposite elbows, you can always clasp the forearms or the wrists. It doesn't need to be exactly in that spot. Eyes can close. You want to feel like you're also getting some length in the sides of the body, the torso, outer hips, maybe even the outer thighs. You'll start to switch the crossing of the legs. So bring the other shin in front, cross the arms the other way. You'll stay right where you are, but you'll feel that transition happen within the body. You'll start to uncross the legs, uncross the arms. You can bring the knees in toward the chest, maybe rock side to side a little bit. And you'll set the feet down onto the mat. Roll over to your right side. Use the hands to bring yourself up to seated, and you'll make your way to tabletop, all fours. And once you get there, let's bring the knees and the inner edges of the feet all the way together. Toes are tucked. Start to walk the hands back toward the legs, coming into a toe tuck. So at some point, you'll need to make sure that the fourth and fifth toe are going forward before you go any further. Maybe the hands stay down on the mat. Maybe you bring the hands up to the thighs. Maybe you sit all the way up so that the head's over the heels. And you can always come forward whenever you want. Don't feel like you have to stay here. And then let's get into the wrists. So point the left fingertips back behind you, grab onto those four fingers, and you're bringing the fingers back to the forearm. We'll all be in a different place with this. The more you do this, the more flexibility you'll get with that wrist and forearm area and the hand in general. So wherever you are and you're feeling some kind of opening happen, that's where you should be. Try to stay with your Ujjayi breath, especially here. And then move it over to that left thumb. So maybe 2, 3, 4 fingers there. You figure out how much pressure you want to apply. That eye of the wrist is still pointing forward. And switch hands. So right forefingers are going back, wrist is over the elbow. Maybe noticing a difference between your dominant hand and your non-dominant hand. Move to that right thumb. And start to release. Hands come back down to the mat. Tops of the feet come to the mat. You can tap the tops of the feet on the mat. We were there for a little while. And then separate the knees and the feet back to hip width distance. Up to you if the tops of the feet are down, or if you keep the toes tucked. Turn the fingertips to point toward the sides of the mat. And then maybe you stay here. If there's enough mobility in the wrist, you can turn the hands all the way around so that the fingertips point toward the thighs. If this is an option, stack the shoulders over the heels of the hands. Take some cat-cow. So reach the heart forward on the inhale, hug the belly in a little bit, lift the tail. On the exhale, round the whole spine, chin in toward the chest. Keep it at about this pace, inhaling forward, exhaling back. So your breaths are still long and slow because we're trying to stay with that Ujjayi breath. And that guides the pace of your movement. One more cycle wherever you are. You'll make your way back to a neutral spine. Turn the hands back around so the fingertips point forward. And let's get one bolster and one block. So, and if you don't have any props, don't worry. You can definitely do child's pose without any props. If you do have props, let's use them. So you'll bring the bolster out in front of you the long way. You'll take a block on the lowest height and you'll lift the bolster up, put the block underneath the bolster. It's about going to go where your head will be. So big toes together, knees are just supporting this back edge of the bolster. You don't really want it to go any further back than that. As you come down onto the bolster, here's where you'll adjust the block. You want it to be like around underneath the head, supporting the head. You'll figure out a good spot. Turn the head to one direction. You can hug the bolster. So depending on where the block lands, you might bring the arms together above the block, or maybe you slide the arms together underneath the block. So see which one, or below the block. So see which one works best for you. Close the eyes. I'll let you know when we're about halfway through the hold so you can turn the direction of the head to even out the neck if the neck will allow for that. But the hips are open. So if the knees are okay with it, hips will just gently fall back toward the heels. Chest is lifted and the head's lifted with the bolster. So you should feel some length maybe in the front side of the body, maybe even the sides of the torso with this type of a child's pose, an elevated child's pose. And if you're not using any props and the forehead's down on the mat, that's great too. You can keep the elbows heavy. The arms don't need to be straight. If you're turning the head in one direction, lift it, turn it the other way. See if that's comfortable. If it isn't, go back to it the way you were. And start to come back up. So if you have props in front of you, set those off to the side. Come back up to hands and knees. And let's come to seated. So feet to one side, legs out in front of you. You'll want a block and a bolster within reach. You're coming down onto your back. So just make sure you have a block and a bolster near the hips. Come on down onto your back, soles of the feet are going to be down on the mat, and we'll come into supported bridge. So press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide a block underneath the hips, lowest height, or maybe the medium height, but only if you tend to go really deep with your back bends. If you keep your back bends to just a regular level or even a lower level, the lowest height's probably fine here. Just to start, we haven't really done much back bending yet. So arms can rest down by the sides. Palms can face up. If you need to lift the chest up a little bit to get the shoulder blades underneath you so you get more width across the chest, you can do that. Coming back to your long inhales and exhales. Let's extend the right leg forward. So heel stays down on the mat. Toes will just point up. That leg can be relaxed. You'll feel a nice opening on the top of the right hip. And let's just do the one leg here. For now, I want you to feel the difference side to side. So with that right leg extended, you might even feel the length go up the whole right side of the body. So way above the hip, maybe side of the abdomen, right side of the chest, maybe even the right arm. Start to slide that right foot back in. So you're back in supported bridge. Feel the difference with both feet on the mat. Extend the left leg forward, slide that heel forward, toes start to point up. And then notice where the length begins, where you begin to feel the length on the left side of the body. Maybe feel that length start to spread the whole length of the left side of the body. And then from here, maybe you extend the right leg forward. So both legs out in front of you. If that doesn't work for whatever reason, you can just go side to side. So bring the left foot back to the mat, right leg extends out in front of you, and then you'll eventually go back over to the left side. Chest is still a little lifted, spreading. And also, if at any point this bothers the lower back, you could stay in supported bridge with soles of both feet on the mat. That's still a back bend. So any version of the legs is a back bend because the hips are elevated on the block. So you just get yourself comfortable. The priority is the back bend, not anything else. So if it's most comfortable with the feet on the mat, then that's where you are. You'll start to bring the feet back in if they're out in front of you, just one foot at a time, coming back to your supported bridge, feeling the difference here. All the ways we change the shape of the legs affects the rest of the back bend. Press into the feet, lift the hips up, slide the block out from underneath you, let the hips come back down onto the mat. Then you'll bring the right knee in toward the chest, leave that left foot where it is. Just feel some space in the lower back. You were there for quite a while. And set the right foot down, hug the left knee in toward the chest. Left foot comes down onto the mat. Scoot the hips over to the left, bring the knees over to the right. You're coming into a spinal twist. So you could take the block and put it between the knees. You could also use a bolster. It's softer, gives you a little bit more padding. You can put that between the knees, ankles, and feet. Left arm reaches out to the side, and you come into a reclined spinal twist. Sometimes this is a lot for the shoulders. So if you have anything going on in the shoulder area, you can also lower that left arm to take away any discomfort in the upper body. If you're not feeling anything, then just keep the left arm where it is. It's probably a good place to be. The head can roll to the left, eyes can be closed. You don't want to feel like you're pushing yourself deeper into the twist. So once you get it set up, see where you can just let go, not holding yourself anywhere. You'll start to bring the head back to center. If you have something between the knees, set it off to the side. Bring the soles of the feet to the mat, coming onto your back again. Let's bring the knees in toward the chest, knees and feet together. Move the knees around in a circle, just stirring the pot. Slow. Excuse me. Switch directions. We went a long time that one way because that sneeze wouldn't come. So we'll just even it out. Feet, come back down to the mat. If you're using a prop, bring it over to your left side. Scoot the hips over to the right. Knees come over to the left. Maybe something between the knees, whatever you used on the first side. If you're doing it again on this side, great. Right arm reaches back behind you. Gaze can start to fall over to the right. Maybe you close the eyes. Once you get the knees going in one direction, the chest the other way, start to let go physically. Just be in the twist. There's no reason to you don't have to do the twist, just feel the twist. You'll bring the head back to center. Set the prop, if you're using one, off to the side. Bring the feet back to the mat, finding center on your back. Knees come in toward the chest and start to move the knees around in a circle. And switch the direction, go the other way. Feet come back down to the mat, roll over to your right side. Use the hands to bring yourself up to seated. Extend the legs out in front of you as you come to seated. So you'll come into a forward fold with the legs out in front of you. Props could be nice here. You could put a bolster on top of the legs. It can come all the way up against the abdomen. Blocks or a blanket could be nice. You could stack a block or two on top of the bolster and see if you can rest the head down onto the blocks. Palms up is also really nice in a forward fold. And if you don't like the blocks underneath the head, you can skip it altogether and just let the head come down. And you don't need any props either. So if you don't have anything, don't feel like you have to use them. I like sometimes the weight of just a light bolster or blanket on top of the legs to just kind of help them press down toward the mat. Rounding of the spine's okay. Head coming down however it wants is okay, especially if you can get that neck to release and not work. You'll start to bring yourself back up to seated. You have anything on top of the legs, set it off to the side. Let's bring, if you have a bolster or a blanket, bring that back behind you. It'll be a pillow. Soles of the feet to the mat. You might need to scoot the hips forward a little bit. If you have blocks, take the blocks on the lowest height, the widest way. You want to bring them so that they'll be underneath the thighs once you lie down onto your back. So as you lie down, make sure the pillow is supporting the neck and the head. Legs can extend out, and you might need to move the blocks a little bit more underneath the thighs than the knees. Knees will just naturally elevate. And then the feet are a little wider than hip width distance. Mine are completely off the mat. Arms down by the sides, palms face up. And you start to come into Shavasana. So what's nice about having the legs elevated like this, you'll get a little bit more space in the back It also is a nice release on the hips. You'll start to wiggle the fingers and the toes, slowly coming out of your Shavasana, but hanging on to as much of it as you want, taking it with you into the rest of your day. Start to walk the feet in, bending the knees. You're using the blocks. Just use the hands to set those off to the side so they're out of the way. That way you can keep the eyes closed. Roll over to your right side, head still on the pillow, just lying in the fetal position. Using the left hand, press yourself up to a comfortable seat with or without props, sitting up as tall as you can. So you have so much more access to your body. Bring the hands together. Maintain the lift of the chest as you slowly bow the head. Take a moment to honor and acknowledge your heart and spirit, bringing it all together. That's what's the most beautiful thing I think about yoga is it's physical, but it ties everything together, making you feel more connected to yourself and everything around you. Bring the head back up, blink open the eyes. Namaste. Thank you. Hope you had a lovely practice. And you were able to disconnect for a while enough to come back into your life with more clarity. I'll see you next time.